The Liberal government's pitch to sell their budget and change their fortunes continues across the country today.
To unlock a path to a safe, secure, comfortable middle-class life for all Canadians, particularly the young Canadians who today feel that that is out of reach.
But that message doesn't seem to be having much of an effect on the polls. In the days after the budget was tabled, Ipsos shows the Conservatives held a 19-point lead over the Conservatives, plus a third of Canadians say they would never vote Liberal in the next election. Abacus data shows no movement in the polls in favor of the Liberals in the days following their pre-budget announcements, and no movement in any of the core trackers for the two younger age cohorts. So, have the Liberals missed a chance to take a bite out of the Conservatives' polling lead with Budget 2024, or could the message need more time to sink in? We're going to talk about that with the Tuesday Power panel. Emily Nicola is a columnist with Le Devoir. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal campaign director. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. Good to see you all. Appreciate it. Michelle, let's start with you. The main target of this budget, as the Liberals have told us again and again and again, are millennials and Gen Zs. If the polling is to be believed, nothing has moved, but are millennials and Gen Zs seeing the budget in real time with the way they consume news, or do we need to wait longer for more targeted digital strategies, or did this just miss them entirely?
Well, I think first we have to put it in context. These polls, one of them was actually taken before the budget was actually tabled. So I'm not saying that anything is fundamentally changed, and I doubt that the top line numbers will change. What you want to see are the underlying numbers softening, right? When you're this far behind, that's what you're looking for, are the key indicators. And so some of the things I saw in that, true, the numbers who are not going to consider the Liberals is not great. But the Conservatives are only 5 points beneath that. So that gap, that delta, is actually quite tight compared to what the top line number party line thing is. So that's something to be looking for. And again, you want to be looking at some of the issue sets, some of the more detailed things, because that's going to move first, and that's going to say if you made your mark. What I'll also say, though, is how are people going to see it if there's no advertising behind it, right? And so, I hope that this would be a strategy that they've laid out. It's a path forward. That's not going to be just kind of a one-time thing. You drop the announcement, the press release goes out, and it's into the trash bin and on to the next thing. It has to be repeated over and over using every bit of free media and earned media that you absolutely can. And then you got to put some weighted pay behind it so that people who we want to see it, those targeted people, see those messages that are key to them. So, you can't just do it as one shot and think that it's going to be an answer.
Right.
If they actually have a full strategy, this will be just one part that should go forward.
Well, Emily, this is what I'm wondering about in terms of reaching that younger cohort of voters, much younger than me, as you are. It's more of a digital strategy play, and I'm sure it's not showing up in my algorithms because I'm going to be 51 soon, and that's not who they're appealing to right now. So how do we assess their effectiveness at reaching the younger generation? Do we jump to conclusions based on what we've seen in the polls, or does this need more time to marinate in terms of reaching them? I don't know. What's your sense?
First of all, I love how you're using your power, the powers invested in you as a CBC host to try to make Gen Z a thing that people say.
I have to speak Canadian English or I get yelled at and hated. So being from Newfoundland, I already get enough complaints about how I say stuff.
Sure. I wish you good luck on that journey. That being said, I do see, some of the Justin Trudeau's Instagram posts get pushed my way. I see when you're on Instagram a lot, what you're seeing is that the liberal liberal videos are overproduced for the Instagram feel. The classic video of a politician walking towards a camera, feeling very confident and cocky, with a smile and telling you those messages. That works great for a TV ad. It sounds off for Instagram. Instagram is more, hey, I'm taking 30 seconds in my busy day to tell you something that's very genuine. And then I'm going to go back to my day, and it looks ugly, but that's what makes it real. So I'm making a bit of a caricature here, but it's overproduced, and that makes it come across as fake. The second thing is that Krista Freeland, in terms of her communication style, not the greatest person to put forward to trying to talk to Gen Z. Gen Z, sorry, David. And
it's working. It's working.
And millennials. And the millennials, that's just not the greatest spokesperson to speak to that generation and to trying to have an emotional connection and relatability. So Justin Trudeau has a team. If he wants to deploy communication strategy that's going to reach younger people, I know it's the tradition to have the finance minister take the lead. But if you're trying to reach young people, I think it could be a team effort.
Yeah, and Françoise, I think that's what they were trying to do in the run-up to the budget, because it felt like it was Sean Fraser's budget for about 2 weeks there, as he was sort of the headline minister at a lot of different things. But I have no clear sense whether they've actually reached younger Canadians with this at this point in time. They have angered a lot of corporate Canadians and incorporated Canadians and wealthier Canadians with the capital gains tax changes, and they've gotten pushback on that. Has that in any way, do you think, crowded things out in terms of them trying to deliver this message of hope?
Well, first, I would like to say, when was the last time we all got excited and happy because of a filing of a budget? I'm looking down decades, and I've rarely seen anybody rejoicing and saying, hey, look, the budget is talking to me, the budget is doing this, and the budget is doing that. So I think we're doing a way too much focus day to day on the budget. The strategy for the Liberals, I think, for the last 2-3 weeks was to let's talk in the public sphere, because Mr. Poilievre was getting all the attention with his rallies and so on. And for a couple of weeks, we saw much more Liberals coming out and talking about different things to come. Now they filed the budget. If they believe in their budget, and I have no reason to believe that they don't, they need to do two things. They need to definitely focus, and they need to get some results that they can really promote instead of just plain air and possibilities. They need the economy and that they have no control or not too much on to improve inflation, interest rates, and so on. They need the mood to change in the country, because when I look at the polls and I see the numbers and I see we get all excited because one party gets 43%, then you have to apply in each provinces and where do those votes go, and so on and so forth. But even on the budget and the impression of people, still 28% had zero or didn't want to voice their opinion. And of the 72% left, it's pretty kif between I don't really care and I'm giving thumbs down. Right. And some will really give a thumbs up. So that's why I go back to my initial proposition. Liberals, if you want to make any possible gain next year when the election comes, if it comes in 2025 like it's supposed to be, well, focus and get some results, because nothing talk more than results. If there's more housing available, it's a tall task, but they kind of paint themselves in that corner and they will have to live with it. And I say campaign matters. Yes. So when there'll be 30-some days, that's when the youth and even the olders, like you, David, we are actually glued to their words in that period of time, and anything can happen. So Still a lot of fun to come in politics.
No, I'll be sitting here with a blanket wrapped around my legs watching the campaign ferociously. But Kate, one of the things the Liberals were hoping to do, it seems, with this campaign was to draw the Conservatives in on what will you cut,
for sure,
and a fight on the capital gains tax. That contrast between them, this is what you use inflection points for to try to sharpen that contrast. On the tax stuff, it doesn't seem, I don't know what the Conservatives are going to do, but they're not going to take the bait, is what it seems. They have not responded or engaged in this in any kind of a way.
Yeah, and this very much was a budget designed to be a conversation around that, and the polling so far has indicated that Canadians weren't all that interested in having that conversation. They wanted to have a conversation about affordability. Some of the Ipsos polling, really interestingly, when you ask Canadians, do you think you'll be better off as a result of this budget? 45% say, no, I won't be. And that was the piece that I think was really missing from the budget is, okay, what is in here that gets at the day-to-day affordability piece? Yes, there's the conversation around housing. We've talked before, that's more of a medium-term play that doesn't provide relief tomorrow or the next day. So that kind of retail piece was missing. I think Françoise has a point in terms of this idea of a post-budget bump and glow is a bit fictitious. It's kind of like looking to a cabinet shuffle to solve all of your political problems or, making a modification around the carbon tax and that's the solve, that's all that we need to do. This has been brewing for so long, this trajectory for the Liberals, and there's that trust deficit. And my co-panelists have some great ideas in terms of advertising. I think that's a good suggestion, and that focus and that discipline. But the elephant in the room is that, no cap, Justin Trudeau has lost his riz. He's not able to connect with the Gen Z anymore. He doesn't have the ability to authentically relate to them. So no matter what he says, it's going to fall on deaf ears.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, I agree with you. A budget in normal times is not going to be a game changer in any way. It's the way this one was done, this campaign style approach of a government that has lost control of the narrative and the day-to-day news agenda, trying to regain control of it. And for a while, they did that, at least in terms of driving what news content and conversations was about. But maybe it's just the way people consume information now and how they've tuned out from traditional media that it's not getting through.
It's part of that, but it was also a deliberate choice on the part of the Liberals to make Budget Day about this capital gains tax. I think that they overestimated the public desire to see businesses and individuals taxed more to pay for Liberal promises as opposed to seeing the Liberals spend less. So that was a choice, and I think it was a strategic miscalculation on their part.
So, Michelle, where do you go from here? I know you've talked about the advertising, and this is something the party may not have the money it needs to do advertising at the scale it would like to do to counter what Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives are able to do. And they've really, since 2015, kind of said no way to the kind of like Canada's Economic Action Plan advertising we used to see under the Harper government. So it takes the public funds away from you and your ability even to do informational advertising that could veer into the political branding thing. So what do you do as a government right now if this was the shot you shot and may have missed?
Keep your aim and keep your focus, to be honest. It's a long, you got to play the long game. What's the ad? You have to say things 1,000 times for 50 people to hear it once. And you've got to keep that kind of old adage in mind, even more so now when, the media and how people consume things is so disparate. They need to have that kind of multi-level strategy going after the various target groups. And they need to focus in with the right messenger, as Emily was saying, and the right message. And they can't just lose focus now and jump to the next thing. Otherwise, you'll never get it across. So it's a huge challenge to keep the news fresh on the things that they want to talk about. There's no one does anything without a good amount of polling behind it. And so it is curious that Mr. Poilievre is choosing to say nothing once again on absolutely all of these issues. Fair enough. At some point, he's going to have to. He's kind of getting the benefit of the doubt of that people think that he's going to get rid of the capital gains tax and reduce it again. I don't know. I doubt it. He certainly hasn't promised it. But we'll see. But at some point, there's going to be that you've got to keep trying to drive those wedges because that's what keeps the conversation going. And the fact that we're still talking about the capital gains a week later is a win in their column. because that was actually something, a tax measure from the last budget. So, that it was a deliberate conversation that they wanted Canadians to have.
But I wonder, Françoise, just on that, and going back to what you said about Finance Minister Freeland, we're still talking about it, but it's because it's being rebranded as a tax on innovation, a tax on doctors, a tax on retirements, which may or may not be what it is, because people have complex financial structures. And while they may have wanted this to be sort of a wedge that they can drive in and make it about class and generational fairness, against all of this pushback, they've been trying to minimize the consequences of it, which makes it sound smaller than I think they need it to be the wedge that actually drives into that hole, right? So how do you prosecute
completely.
that when you're trying to make the argument you're a good steward of the economy as well?
Well, somebody was sleeping at the wheel in my book, because in a sense, they should have known that there would be some pushback. They wanted the narrative, if I'm correct, to be, we're taxing the rich, those who've got properties, we're not taxing the residents, the principal residents, and so on and so forth. Now you get the doctors in, you get all type of people. I've got people writing to me every day. One guy is a farmer, and he invested in some real estate, and that's his pension fund for when he's done working so hard. So those are maybe things that they didn't foresee in some aspect, or maybe they're not even covered. I don't know. I'm not a specialist, but they should have sell it better and know beforehand that those cases would come out. I mean, don't make me bleed with the doctors who are incorporated, like in Quebec, where they get all type of advantages to be doing so, not like us lame people who are not doctors, who pay some full price just to get real estate. Governments help them to set shop and be able to see public, and good for that, because we need them to act. But then they become a corporation, they get more money, and so on and so forth. So the government, sometimes they've got great ideas. They don't look too far away. They don't analyze in depth. And then when something comes like this, they look like people who are not ready, who don't know what they're talking about. And Emily, I think, was saying that Chrystia Freeland is not their best communicator. And if there's one thing, your finance minister must be one of your best, because all the trust and faith in the budget lies on their shoulder. So if she's not their best communicator, they've got a problem right then and there.
So Emily, to pick up on something that Michelle had said, I've seen Conservatives asked about the capital gains tax many, many, many times, and I don't know what they're going to do. I know they want to axe the carbon tax, fix the budget, build the homes, stop the crime. And cut the CBC, and that's kind of where it ends, right? In terms of clarity. So how sustainable is that now, with the runway we have left to an election, and these sort of, whether they're big enough wedges or not, these specific things being put on the table that visible and loud and vocal cohorts of the population are weighing in on, for the opposition and the government frontrunners not to take clear positions on these things? How sustainable is that, do you think?
There's two things. On the Liberal side, for the wedges to actually be wedges, they need to be strongly, claimed as wedges, and not trying to meet people in the middle, which is hard to do when you're liberal, because you're a centrist by DNA. But if you're going for the tax the rich thing, which I can guarantee you, there's very few millennials and Gen Z who feel attacked by the capital gain thing.
Right.
If you're really trying to get those people to vote for you, you should not be shying away from using the tax the rich narrative that you had planned to do, even if it makes some doctors unhappy. I don't know a lot of people under the age of 35 who will feel sorry for the specialist who has created this great structure that allows them to not pay a lot of taxes. I don't think there's a lot of sympathy for that when you're not affording a home. So I think they need to understand that they're not going to make everyone happy with this narrative, which one again runs against the DNA of a party that calls itself the natural governing party, and the one that can bring all Canadians together. In an age of polarized politics, that's not what their political reflexes are. And on the Conservative Party, there is game changer that can happen, in the sense that now they are not necessarily that much forced to have not only just criticism but actually policies. As we were, if we were heading towards a campaign, they'll have to have a program at some point, and so that's why campaigns matter.
Right.
Is that if there's a conservative program and people don't like it, it changes the whole narrative of Canadian politics. And so as long as they don't have that, they can be rising in a poll. But if whatever they come up with is not, they haven't thought it through that well, that's when you could see a change in the tendency that we've seen in the polls that is very much dig very deep at this point. But it could change when the Conservatives are not just challenging, but actually saying something. I'm exaggerating.
No, I know what you mean. Something more specific. And you know, look, this approach has worked well for them, and I don't see them switching it until they have to. But look, I do want to just quickly switch topic because we got Minister Stephen Guilbeault coming up in just a second. But they want to talk about capital gains tax rather than carbon tax. But the Prime Minister was talking about the carbon tax today in Saskatchewan, announcing that people there will continue to receive the full federal rebate, despite the fact the province isn't collecting the tax on home heating. It had been previously suggested the rebates might be reduced because of less revenue being remitted, but the Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, says this decision means the people of Saskatchewan is going to get the same unreduced rebate as every other Canadian gets. Just have a listen.
4 times a year, they will get the Canada carbon rebate, as do other Canadians and provinces where the federal system is applied, and they won't be penalized because their Premier Scott Moe, is playing politics with climate change. And the Prime Minister and I think Cabinet felt that it wouldn't be fair for the people of Saskatchewan to pay for the irresponsible attitude of the provincial government.
Okay, I want to do a quick round on this before we take a break. But Kate, on this, talking about not taking bait and giving people fights they want on their terms, by not reducing the rebate, are they not taking the bait Scott Moe wanted and giving him the political fight he wants in election, letting CRA deal with this through the tax system? Or are they kind of backing down on a threat to impose consequences on Saskatchewan because of the actions of the Premier? Where do you think this lands? Yeah,
I think it is a little bit of a middle ground. I'm not sure that it will do much to deter Scott Moe's fervor against the carbon tax.
I don't think it will.
But I'm also not sure that it's going to necessarily have the consequence of the public saying, oh, I'm so glad the government is being the bigger person here and, I get my rebate. I think that generally speaking, public opinion has shifted on this in such a way that the federal government, kind of no matter what they do at this stage, there's going to be a lot of questions about whether or not this is an effective policy, whether or not the rebate will actually, make one kind of whole, considering what they might be out. So they could have forced the question a little bit harder. Again, difficult to do that when they did open the door in October to some changes.
On home heating oil?
Yeah. So that's it's been challenging for them to navigate that.
Okay, Michelle, what are your thoughts on this? It's interesting because I think it was Jonathan Wilkinson who said on the show that maybe the rebates would be reduced, and now that's not happening.
Well, let's be honest. There's not a lot of votes in Saskatchewan that are coming the Liberal way, even in the best of times, right? But I suspect that there's no good politics in this. Don't want to just take Scott Moe's bait and give him red meat and fodder for the election campaign and one more thing to rail against. And I also suspect that it would be pretty difficult to try and figure out how to do some kind of a calculation and change CRA just for the taxpayers of Saskatchewan. And, it'd probably cost more to do that than they're actually paying out to give the full rebate.
Right.
And so it was better politics. Keep it up.
Okay. Emily, a quick 30 seconds from you and then 30 seconds for Françoise, and then we have to say goodbye.
You don't want to punish the people for the action of their government. So even though the tax is not collected at this point, if it will be in the future, it would be punishing the people not to collect the rebate. And that's been the narrative coming from the criticism of the Liberal government, that they are having an approach to climate policy that is about punishing individuals. So I think it's the right call for them to not do that and still offer the rebate.
Okay. Françoise, your quick final thoughts.
Very quickly, and I hope you ask Minister Guilbeault, just for my sake, is the tax still going to be charged and just not collected by nobody, it's going to be in limbo, in which case I agree, don't penalize the public. But if it's not charged and people are receiving a check on top of it, I'm just wondering about the legal ramification and how all this gets settled in. So if it's just a question of I charge the tax, but then nobody wants the amount that I charge to somebody, not clear in my head. So I'm going to listen to your interview very, very, very closely.
Well, I think that's probably more a question for the Canada Revenue Agency in terms of how they're going to get it back, right? Because I think this
They're a little busy right now.
I think this ends up in federal tax court. His Majesty the King versus His Majesty the King. It's going to be quite the case. I want to thank you all.
Long live the King.
Emily, Nicolas, Michelle Cadario, Francois Boivin, and Kate Harrison. Thanks so much, gang.
Thank you.
See you.